Okay, so as I mentioned, this is the California Naturalist course for 2026, and hosted by Cactus Cloud Institute in partnership with the University of California Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources California Naturalist Program. And I was going to start out a little bit kind of talking a little bit about the history of the course because this year is in many ways going to be very similar to the previous years of this course, but in some ways it'll be a little bit different. Um, so this is the first graduating class, the 2018 class of California Naturalists, Desert Sands and Sky Islands, California Naturalist. There's me in the back, so I was part of the class, and also one of the guest instructors and helping to coordinate things a little bit. This uh, version of the course and all the versions of the course that have been offered before this were all offered by the University of California Riverside Palm Desert Center. But this year they decided they didn't have the capacity to do it, and going forward they don't have the capacity to do it. And so Cactus to Cloud is going to step in and take over the kind of administration of the course. Um, Now, as far as the actual course itself, if you've heard about the course or have friends who've taken it or any of that kind of thing, we're going to try and keep everything that's good about it as close as possible as we can, and make some improvements. Like one improvement we're going to do is lower the price a little bit to start out, um, and we'll see how it goes from there in terms of other kinds of small improvements we may make. Um, so if you haven't heard of Cactus the Cloud Institute, we're a pretty new organization. We'll be turning 5 years old next year, sometime maybe during the run of the course. I got to check the date on that. But if you have heard of us, it's probably either through California Naturalist or one of the similar courses that we have offered or been involved with, or through the Chuckwalla National Monument, or through one of the other kind of partnerships that we're involved in. So, we're involved in we're involved in California Naturalist, in partnership with the UC A&R, but also we were a big part of establishing Chuckwalla National Monument, a new national monument here in the Coachella Valley, um, and also continuing to make sure that it stays protected and designated. We're a part of the Friends Grassroots Network, the 30 by 30 Power Nature Coalition, Protect California Deserts Coalition. We're involved in community science projects through SciStarter. Um, if you've heard of any of these groups, great. If not, maybe check them out because they're all real great coalitions and help us get offer a lot of the programs we do, because we're just a pretty small team here. Um, yeah, and then as far as California Naturalist itself goes, one of the questions I got over email and get a lot of times and can be a little bit weird is we got kind of different levels of programming um, that are offered through UC A&R. So you've got University of California Agricultural and Natural Resources Department, and underneath that they have a sub group called UC Environmental Stewards, and then underneath that you have two courses that they offer and partners can offer. One is California Naturalist, which is what you're um, listening to right now, info about right now, and that is something we're going to be offering in the spring going forward. I guess winter, spring, um, going forward. And then there's the Climate Stewards class, which is a class we're also going to offer starting in the fall of next year and then going forward, most likely fall, um, end of September and into November, I think. So if you're interested in that course, and I definitely recommend both of them, um, stay tuned for more dates on that. Okay, and then as far as the other things that we're keeping the same about the course is kind of the instructor team. So, there's been a group of people involved in teaching the course all throughout the last 7 or 8 years or whatever we're up to now, and that's pretty much going to stay the same. So, I'll be the person who you probably hear from the most by email when it comes to registering for the course and applications, and I'll be there in class and all that kind of stuff. But the person who you'll maybe hear from the most as an instructor is Dr. Cameron Barrows, who has the same last name. We are related. Um, and he'll be, getting to do most of the fun part of the class, and offering a lot of the instructional material. And so I'm going to turn the presentation over to him at this point so that he can kind of go over the important parts of the what makes Desert Sands and Sky Islands unique.
All right. Well, thank you, Colin. And can everybody hear me all right? I think so. Yes. Um, so this is a really fun class, and I hope you'll get some of our enthusiasm about it. We both, the whole team, Colin, myself, my wife, and Cindy are in love with the California deserts, and we want to share that love with you. But we also realize that the deserts have been misconstrued and misrepresented in many, many ways. I often use a quote that is from the Oxford University Dictionary that says deserts are dry, hot areas devoid of life and sparse vegetation, and the only thing that's true in that is that they're hot and dry, I guess. But otherwise, deserts are extremely rich in biodiversity, extremely rich in different species of animals and plants. And in some cases, we have the highest level or numbers of species of many groups, certain groups of beetles, certain groups of bees, certain groups of shrubs, certain groups of lizards, higher levels than any place in North America. Um, and that's largely misunderstood because the people think of deserts as a place where you can just go and you know grade them and put in a warehouse, or grade them and put in an off-road vehicle park, or grade them and do this or that. And there's little, in their minds, little loss, but in fact there is considerable loss when those things happen. And so we're looking for people that want to learn as much as possible about deserts, um, and ultimately hopefully become stewards of our deserts. So um, there are some relatively minimal requirements. I don't, Colin, if you could go to that slide, it might be the next slide here. Yeah. So the first thing that I often get is, what about tests and grading? And there's no tests. You will never be given a test. You don't. There's no grading. You won't get an A, B, C, or D. It's pass fail basically. The requirements are a certain number of hours, 40 hours of education, 8 hours in the field. You'll get way more than that because we like, to be a naturalist, you can do a little bit in the classroom, but to really understand nature, you got to be out there, getting your feet a little bit sandy. And so we're going to be spending a lot of our time outdoors. And in this case, at least five field trips. There may be more than that. We'll get when we get to the schedule. There is a notebook. There's some recommended reading there. The notebook, or the handbook, has just recently been rewritten. The previous one did what everybody else in the world does and ignored the California desert as being unimportant. And so the handbook was all written about the Central California coast, the Sierra Nevada, the Central Valley, and it completely ignored our deserts. And because of my urging them, they've rewritten it. I just received the new copy just this past week, and I'll tell you, it's better. It's still not good enough. So I was just skimming it, and then they were talking about the oldest living organism in California is bristlecone pine, and I think they said it was somewhere between 5 and 7,000 years old. And while bristlecone pines can get that old, creosote bushes can be twice that old, and they ignored that altogether. And so I'm kind of frustrated about that. But you're going to learn the real stuff about deserts. Um, so Colin, so anyway, there will be some reading that you should do, but I don't stress that because I think you're going to get more out from the lectures and more from the days in the field than you'll ever get from the notebook or the handbook. The only real requirements that you have are one, that you attend the class. You have to attend the class. Two, um, there is something that a lot of you might already be familiar with, but it's a online means of cataloging your sightings. It's called iNaturalist, and so
I think
we
that's
won't.
2 slides from now, just so you know.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there'll be some requirements of participating with iNaturalist and taking photographs and logging them in on iNaturalist. And the bigger project is what we call a stewardship project, or has previously been referred to as a capstone. And that will be the last day or two of our last meeting, or maybe the last two meetings, where the students will select a topic that they want to do a deeper dive in. And I've heard of people, well, I'll give you some examples. Some people have said they wanted to design um, landscaping around their house or a community um, park that is dominated by natives, and that would be a great um, stewardship project. It might be organizing yourself to help people go out and take care of invasive species in the desert. It might be just finding a group of species, let's say bees or ants, that you really want to take a deeper dive in and learn more about, and then your fellow students what you learned. What did you find out about whatever group of plants or animals that you want to take a deeper dive and um, go into more detail than we do necessarily in the class. Um, it should take roughly about 8 hours to put your stewardship project together. It's something you do on your own time, and then do a presentation. I did hear a couple of women I was talking to recently where I was suggesting they take the class, and they said, could we do um, write and perform a song about protecting the desert? And I said, sure. I mean, basically, the only real constraint is it needs to be about the desert, and it should focus on, I mean, overall, the focus should be you want to educate or enlighten people who you're presenting this project to learn more about the deserts. So if we could have the next slide. So you do get a certificate at the end. The certificate is signed by the instructors and the folks at the University of California Ag and Natural Sciences, what Colin referred to as UC ANR. Um,
I also put this slide in because it was the only one I had where you could see the UCR campus, which we're going to talk about the location in the next slide.
yeah, so we'll be meeting at or the lectures will be there, and we'll probably, in most cases, when we're doing field trips, we're going to try and do carpooling, and we can park there as we go out. So between January 31st, which is the end of next month, and April 22nd, which is
Sorry, that's a
for
typo. It's the 18th.
there we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry. And so this gives you an idea of what the class is going to be like. So if it says the venue is a classroom, it means it's a lecture. So that first lecture, we're going to give you an introduction to the class. talk about the early naturalists and what they achieved, talk about traditional knowledge, how the indigenous people of our deserts um, approach nature and their views on nature, which is in many cases much more sophisticated than a lot of what we have learned about our deserts, certainly far more sophisticated than what the Oxford Dictionary includes. And then we're going to do sort of switch off between field trips and classroom, and then near the end, do a lot more field trips. We're going to go to places that otherwise you would not be able to go to. We just have connections. So one would be the Coachella Valley sand dunes, which at one point was 100 square miles of the Coachella Valley. Now it's less than 10 square miles of the Coachella Valley. So we've lost 90% of the sand dunes. What's left are protected in national wildlife refuges or other forms of protected areas. And so they're off limits to the public unless you're doing something with our class or you're helping with some research projects, which is some of the things a lot of our graduates have done is have volunteered to help on a lot of research projects that are going on up there. The next lecture will sort of pun intended, is create a bedrock or a basis for everything else we're going to learn because you start with the geology and from there you build on with plants and animals and the conservation. So we're going to talk about geology, climate, and conservation. Then go to Painted Canyon and the brand new Chuckwalla National Monument. A lecture about desert plants and one of our graduates is going to talk about birds. Going to the Dos Palmas Conservation Area, another place where um, we're going to have access that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get. You can hike into it, and it's a really long, hot hike to get into it. But we're going to be able to drive into this core of it and be able to go in. It's a wetland near the Salton Sea that is really quite spectacular. And then we'll be right beside the Salton Sea and be able to talk about that as well. Lectures about reptiles, mammals, and insects. In many cases, I'll be doing the lecture. Sometimes Colin will be doing some of the lectures. And we also have some guest lectures one will be talking about insects and one will be talking about the indigenous perspective. One will be talking about birds. And so in many cases, they're researchers or postgraduates of the class who have become experts in those fields. The next will be a transect along Highway 74, going up to the Santa Rosa and San Jacinto National Monument. Another field trip, the next two field trips will focus on the higher elevation deserts, the Mojave Desert, and we're going to go up to the Desert View Conservation Area, which is it's just basically just outside of the town of Joshua Tree, and then go to the Pioneer Town's Mountains Preserve, which is a little bit further than that. Um, so after that will be stewardship projects. We'll fit as many as we can in that first opportunity, and then if necessary, we'll do the second, and then we'll have our graduation. So that's what the class is going to be looking like. Hopefully, this is something that doesn't surprise any of you, and it's exactly what you were hoping for. But this information session is really a chance for you to ask questions. And so I don't know, Colin, if we have any more slides or not, or if
There's a
that's
couple more. Yeah, but I thought this would be a good spot to sort of go over the one of the as Dr. Barris talked about, the main kind of requirement for the course is that you show up for the 40 hours. So, just being in class attendance is really can be a little bit more sort of the most challenging part because you're kind of giving up every Saturday, not giving up every Saturday. It's a great fun time, but you're committing every Saturday for a couple months. Um, So the construction of the course is you have to do 40 hours, and we're doing 44 hours, basically, each class being about 4 hours, um, which means that you can miss one class without any penalty, and still meet your certification requirement. Um, and after that, it becomes harder to miss classes, but um, we on a case by case basis, there may be opportunities to do makeups if you have to miss, if you're looking at your schedule and you have a wedding or a birthday or something that you have to miss. And so we're not for example, the April 4th, which is Easter weekend, we're not going to have a required class, but we will be having a field trip. Um, that is a potential opportunity to both get some new interesting experiences in the field, but also can be used as a makeup if you miss another field trip. Um, Especially like, it's would be a good chance to make up the previous field trip if you have to miss that one. And if you have other questions about, specific days that you might miss, that's, like I said, that's often one of the most common questions that people who are interested in the course have. You can email either well, probably both of us, and we can go over exactly what we would recommend, whether that's doing a makeup or waiting till next year to take the class or what have you. I think we just have this was the one that talked about iNaturalist. If you want to go over a little bit more of that, um, but otherwise we can get into questions, I think.
Yeah. You can see the second bullet down is the iNaturalist account, and um, the minimum we're requiring is 10 contributions to iNaturalist. And so what not iNaturalist is, if you haven't experienced it before, it's a group of people that it's creates a community of naturalists. So you and people who, when they make their contributions, it becomes part of a database that can be used by scientists to understand where animals and plants occur across landscapes, but also how things are changing over time. I, for instance, have used it in trying to look at issues related to climate change and looked at where people were finding organisms today versus where naturalists 20 or 30 years ago were finding them, and see if there's any differences. And lo and behold, there are differences. Um, so it's a really valuable thing. A lot of people get hooked on it, and when we say you have to do 10 observations, a lot of our graduates do probably 30 a day. They're out a lot, going out and making contributions because it's just really fun. You basically add these, Colin will explain how to do it in class, but it's a sort of a two-part process. One part is you um, include a photograph of whatever organism you observed, and then somebody, usually somebody with some expertise, has to agree that that's indeed what you saw. And so once it gets to that agreement, it has a quality that is referred to as research grade, and that's not a word we take lightly. A research grade means that scientists can then take that same observation and use it to contribute to the broader questions that they might have about conservation or distribution or climate change or any number of things. So, um, so that's what that's all about. Um, I will say that um, we have, once students have taken the class, those whose schedule allow it have become very interested in continuing the sort of community of naturalists that we create. And so we have right now, every Wednesday and every Friday, a group of class graduates gets together and we go hiking someplace, and we do it every week of the year. And we do iNaturalist sightings. We do sort of impromptu discussions about geology and the animals and plants that we see along the way. And so it becomes an opportunity, as I've mentioned, I guess, several different times, to become part of a community of naturalists if that's something that interests you and if you have the time and energy to do that. Um, and so something to think about anyway as we go forward.
Yeah, and I'll kind of to take off on that, I think one of the real valuable things that I see as the course, both on the instructor side and having, graduated from the course, is that like the class is just the beginning, right? It's that community um, of naturalists that continues onward that I think is maybe even the most valuable part of the class. And so, like at the end here, the last bullet point is about volunteering. There's no volunteering requirement that comes with the course, um, but it's encouraged, and kind of the origin of the California Naturalist and environmental stewards programs really come from that stewardship and kind of original envisioning. And a lot of folks who still take the class maybe are sort of like docents or volunteers with local environmental organizations or agencies that maybe lead hikes or do stewardship of very trail maintenance or invasive species or community science, whatever kind of um, volunteer projects may be out there. So the California Naturalist sort of helps those people be better at their volunteer job. And so that's kind of built into the program where you have the opportunity to record hours and demonstrate the impact that you're making. You get a little pin for every some number of hours that you do annually that you record in the Naturalist portal. Um, which is all great. I also would want to point out that, again, it's not required. So we also, one of the things that we've really focused on at CactusToCloud is to say, let's add on to that and say, also, people who are involved in their getting an education or it's part of their careers, this is also a really valuable course for them. They may not have time to volunteer. They may be getting paid to do what other people are volunteering to do. That's okay too. I just wanted to throw that out there as an add-on. Um, oh yeah, this was the no tests and no grades. And then I think it's all pictures. Oh, no. Uh, yeah, so the only like required things you need to provide would be to have an internet connection and an email account that you're, responding to communication with, creating an iNaturalist account. Again, that's all free. Um, and bring your own pen and pencil and, have the gear to walk or hike. But otherwise, we provide most of the things you need to have. We provide the textbook, that's part of the course fee. We provide the field notebook, that's part of your course fee, um, and so forth. I think it's all just pictures. And again, this is part of the community. Let me back out of presentation and I'm gonna turn on the ability for folks to unmute or raise their hand if they'd like. If there's anybody who has any questions at this point, maybe you could raise your hand or type it in the chat. I do see one question from Alfonso. Will it ever be possible for the lectures to be available for online attendance, in-person attendance only be necessary for the field trips? Go ahead and answer.
So the in-class um, lectures, to a certain extent, that would work. But we also have people that are bringing things into the class. They'll be bringing plant specimens. They'll be bringing some live reptiles. They'll be bringing um, potentially some insects and things like that. And so um, I would recommend that if you think that you just aren't going to attend any of the lectures, then that's probably not great. If you happen to miss one and you just want to get as much as you can um, from whatever you missed, we will, if to the part of it that is a lecture itself, where there's a PowerPoint and screen time and things like that, that could be that recorded and made available to you. Um, so I mean, you can get that, but I would, if you really just don't want to attend any lecture because you're otherwise busy on a lot of Saturdays, then this might not be a good match for you.
I'll add on to that as well. There had been situations where we were sort of forced into it. We offered the course during COVID, and uh, we, ended up sort of shifting to a hybrid, virtual model halfway through the course, or with not Cactus Cloud, but we were involved. I was involved in some of that, and it's a pretty big technical lift on our side to administer that and have the recording and all of the sort of technical capabilities to do that. So I'm not saying it's not impossible that it couldn't happen in the future, but for this year, we really want to focus on making sure that the course gets offered the best way it can. And I think that, as Dr. Barrow has mentioned, is in person, because I think it's a little bit of it underplays it to say that it's a lecture. There are portions of the class that are in person in the classroom that are a lecture, but a lot of it is discussion and hands-on things that are happening. So more like a lab than a lecture. Um, and also, I'll say that if you're interested in that kind of program, the upcoming 2026 version of the class may not be the right one for you, but we are going to be offering, as we sort of get our feet under us with the changes in the course and the change in administration. We do have plans for future versions and for climate stewards, which do work a little differently and might work a little better with a schedule that's not totally in person. So stay tuned. Any other questions? I don't see any hands, but feel free.
Margaret unmuted herself. I don't know if she has a question or not.
Thank you. Yes. I don't have a sense really when the course is done, what level of expertise you would anticipate the graduates to have. Is this kind of exposing students to a big range of topics? And students then go into it as much as they want, or is there an expectation we'd be able to do certain tasks or observations once we graduate?
It's a great question. I think overall, it's a letting you experience a lot of different topics, um, each of which somebody could do multiple PhD dissertations on. So we're not going to dive into it to that level, but I will say that a lot of our graduates then, if they have the available time, go and help people who are doing research, and they show up with a level of knowledge that far exceeds the average person that comes off the street. And so the researchers really love to have our graduates help them. And so we have lots of opportunities for our graduates to then help with survey. Right now, there's some surveys going on in palm oases. They're trying to look at the status of the palm oases that were surveyed several decades ago to see what kind of changes have happened. We have other students that are going out on the sand dunes and helping people do surveys for some of the endangered plants, endangered lizards, and um, the, uh, none of the insects are endangered, but there's some that are found nowhere else in the world except for on the sand dunes of the Coachella Valley. So it makes you much more attractive to somebody who is doing their deeper dive research projects. But it also might stimulate you to do your own. And there's no reason that you have to be a student at UCR or some other university to do those kind of deeper dives and really make some amazing contributions to the biodiversity and the richness of our deserts here in Southern California. Largely, as I said early on, most folks just were given this standard statement that there's nothing going on here. So if you want to do research, you should go to the Sierra Nevada, or you should go to the seacoast, or you should go to the redwood forest. And only in the last, maybe decade or so are people starting to scratch the surface of the amazing biodiversity of the deserts. And so almost anything that you find is and sort of do a deeper dive in terms of understanding how many of those individuals there might be, or what their distribution is. Those are all very valuable contributions that you can make on your own, either through iNaturalist or through the support of some of the researchers that are doing work here in the Valley.
And again, to add on to that, I think one of the kind of values, or one of the things that you're really getting out of the course, that I would say, is that sort of natural history. It's not that you're going to come out of this course as a botanist or a herpetologist or as an ornithologist, but you're going to come out of it as a naturalist. And that being a naturalist is more about that kind of seeing the connections between geology and climate, and understanding a little bit about how these things are all connected. And it lays that foundation in a way that going off and just being an expert in plant taxonomy might be a little bit disconnected from some of um, the things connected to it. Hopefully that kind of answers the question a little bit, Margaret. Alfonso has another question in the chat about other complementary courses that are recommended before or after. Not, and definitely from the perspective of people not going into a college or university program.
So a lot of our California Naturalist students take the Climate Stewards class next. And I used to teach that. I passed that on to actually my wife. So it's another person with the last name Barrows that is the lead instructor there. Um, and there are some real distinct differences in that class. It's a fairly recently developed class. It's probably only about 4 or 5 years old in terms of since it's been developed. And unlike the naturalist class, which is we're trying to teach you how to understand, as Colin said, the connections and the diversity of animals and plants here in the desert. The Climate Stewards is really teaching you about how to make a difference as a activist and to change the world to a better place, a healthier place. And it's a little bit more structured. There is required reading. There's no tests and no grades, but it's a much more structured course than the California Naturalist course is. So a lot of people do that. Otherwise, I am not familiar with any other ongoing multi-week courses, but there are things. There's some geology weekend courses you can take. There are some weekend birding expeditions that you can do. And so instead of going in as a novice, after you take a class like this, you go in with quite a bit of knowledge, and you can then build on that knowledge with those more focused classes.
Yeah, and just to kind of preview one of the things that that will happen as the course is we have this group, it's like an email group that folks join as part of, taking the class. So you're connected to your fellow classmates and to past graduates. And a lot of times there'll be those kinds of opportunities. There's a class offered, not necessarily something we're offering, but just there's an opportunity to learn about something as a workshop, and that'll get shared there. So it could be a little bit of a kind of bulletin board for that kind of opportunity. Um, Also, Cactus to Cloud, we don't, those are the Climate Stewards and California Naturalists are the two that we offer. But there are other um, programs that we offer, educational programs, which could be, webinars like this, could be in-person hikes, activities, could be opportunities for advocacy and that kind of thing. So make sure you're following us on Instagram, or you're on our email list, I guess, if you're hearing this part. But stay tuned for that kind of stuff upcoming. And again, we're getting our feet under us here, but we'd like to offer like a more advanced plant class in the future or something like that, so folks can take that next step beyond the sort of broader overview. Other questions? If I meant to put in a slide with our emails. Um, but you should have all got an email um, from me probably a few times now, and I usually copy Dr. Barrows on those so he gets them. I also totally forgot and want to acknowledge Cindy, who's actually CactusToCloud president in the chat. She's been adding in links to the application and to the next info session and to Instagram and all that kind of stuff. Cindy's also a California Naturalist instructor and graduate of both the California Naturalist and the Climate Steward programs. So you'll see her around and in emails, I'm sure. She focuses a little bit more on that advocacy and being a real great advocate for the desert, at the political level. And so we'll be, I mostly will be focused on this part of the class, and she'll be focused on other stuff. But you should know she's there and doing good stuff. Um, okay, I don't see any other hands. If you do have questions, feel free to follow up later. This has been recorded, and we'll post or share a recording with you folks if you'd like to listen back on anything. Trying to think if there's anything else I was going to say. I think I'm about good.
One more question.
Yes, go ahead.
So if we want to proceed with enrolling in the class, do we need to do anything else? Or we have now applied and we're waiting to hear our status?
Good question. Yeah. So here's what's going to happen next. We're about to take time off for the holidays, so not a lot, but definitely apply as soon as possible, I would say, because we do consider the sort of order of operation, the order of applications that come in as far as where we get to. I'll say we're not quite full in terms of applications, but we're not that far off either. So if you're interested in the course, I do recommend that you apply sooner rather than later. And as you go through the application, we just want to know a little bit more about you. Um, it's not there's no wrong answers on the application or anything like that. It's not meant to be like weeding people out or anything like that. If you come this far, you're probably a good fit for the class. Um, but one of the things that will definitely potentially follow up with you on is if you're interested in a scholarship. We do offer scholarships to help um, make sure that everybody is able to take part in the course. But the scholarships, we only have so many. We can't give everybody a scholarship. Um, so there'll be like a check a check mark on the application where you check that you're interested in a scholarship. And if you check that box, we'll follow up with you with an additional application for the scholarship, just to get some additional information, so that if we have more people interested in scholarships than we have spaces, then we'll have some method for choosing folks there. And whether scholarship or not, sometime in the first week or two of January, I will get back with everybody and let you know that, yeah, we either have a seat for you or we don't. And then along with that, there'll be an invoice to pay for the course fee. And as part of the application, there, I think it outlines the like refund policy and some of the deadlines in there. So take a look at that. But other than that, you'll be ready to go for the start of class at the last Saturday in January. But don't expect to hear from me like right away, just because we're going into Christmas and New Year's, and we'll be taking some time off. If that kind of answers your question there.
Yeah, what we've found in the past is that the ideal class is somewhere between about 18 and 25 students. And if it gets too much more than that, then at least on field trips, I get the feeling that people just get lost in the crowd and they don't get that one-on-one experience that we like to provide people. So as we get closer and closer to that number, 20 to 25, we will definitely start encouraging people to start thinking about next year.
I just saw a question from Beth Haverslew in the chat about applying and not getting a confirmation. Beth, I don't see an application from you, completed application from you. So it's possible it might have been incomplete, or
It could have been the interest form, maybe.
you might have filled out the interest form but not the application. So yeah, make sure you're filling out the application, the full application, which it should have 4 different pages that you have to kind of click through each time. Each page has about maybe 5 questions on it. But if you just gave me your name and email, then that wasn't all the way through to applying. That's a good question. Let me see if there's others. Martha, I see your application.
I see the application for Martha, Melissa, Morgan, from the people that are in this
People here.
information session. But I could go ahead and drop the link again in the chat if that helps.
Oh, so just to confirm, you don't see an application from Margaret Sullivan.
Let me double check.
Yes, Margaret Sullivan, I do see your application.
Oh, yeah.
You applied on the 9th.
Thank you.
Yeah, so those name again for the people that are in this meeting that we received an application for is Margaret, Melissa, Morgan, and Martha.
So, looks like Beth, you better, if you did fill one out and it got lost, just do it again and make sure that, and then, Cindy will almost certainly get back to you right away and let you know that they've received it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any way of seeing like incomplete ones, and it's just a Google form, so it's relatively simple. But yeah, so if I don't for Beth, it looks like you'll need to reapply. Yeah, but no big deal.
Unless there's another name, maybe I know sometimes folks apply like using their middle name. Is that maybe a possibility here? Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye out for your application, Beth. and we'll let you know as soon as we get it.
Any other questions before we sign off for the evening? All right, folks. Well, have a happy evening and happy holidays. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope to see you all, applications from all of you. I really um, can't overstate how, we talk a lot about the requirements. There is some kind of structure to the course. It is it's serious university level course, but it's also, more importantly, a lot of fun, and can be really life changing for a lot of the folks who've taken it. So, really do encourage you to apply, and hope to see y'all in class in January.
See you all. Thank you for joining us.